This is the third video in my favorite water cooling cases series. Now, if you saw the first two, the first one was the Cooler Master H500M, and then we have the Lee & Lee Dynamic XL. Now for my third favorite water cooling case, we're gonna tackle the famous Fractal Design Meshify S2. So let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. Thank you for joining me for another video. If you like my content, please subscribe, smash that like button, leave a comment below. What's your favorite water cooling case? Alright guys, so if you've seen my first two favorite water cooling case videos, the Cooler Master H500M and the Lee & Lee Dynamic XL, I'm bringing you now the Meshify Fractal Design S2. And these are all cases that I did pretty extensive sort of loops in, as well as have them for months and months so you can see the overall durability, how easy it is to maintain it, and things of that nature. Like the first two videos, we're going to tackle three separate areas. The first is going to be the aesthetics, second is going to be the performance, and then the third is going to be stuff like build quality, the overall value, and how it's held up over time. So let's get right to the performance. Now, the Cooler Master H500M is a tremendously good airflow case, and we pointed that out because it has these awesome 200mm fans on the front, allowing for really good airflow through the case. Now, the Fractal Design Meshify S2 is no different. Because of the mesh panel in the front as opposed to the Define R6, which has a much more solid panel, you get a tremendous amount of airflow, and the front panel makes so much difference. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal having a closed off panel, you know, for your, especially if you have a radiator there, like a 240mm or something like that. But when it's open and the air is flowing through, it makes an absolutely like tremendous difference in your temperatures, which translates to lower noise, because then you can run your fans lower, because if it's getting kind of choked from air, you're going to have to run those fans much higher, and more likely you're going to hear them a lot more. And in a case like the Meshify S2, it's definitely more open than the R6, so you really want to avoid that. Likewise, the top panel also has great airflow. So the water cooling build I did in this case, I actually put a 240mm radiator on the bottom, 240 on the front, and a 360 on top. Now, I know that's a little bit overkill. A lot of people may just end up doing, I don't know, one on the front, one on the top, and leave the bottom for cable management or things like that. But I wanted to get the most water cooling performance I could, because I was definitely rocking some pretty beefy specs in this case, including a 2080 Ti, as well as a 12-core Intel processor, you know, X299, so everything gets pretty toasty. So I wanted to have as much performance as possible. This case did not disappoint at all. For example, with the GPU, often the GPU is the way that I gauge temperature in water cooling cases. It's in terms of the water temperature and the actual temperature of the GPU. Generally, the temperature of a Founders Edition GPU without any water block on it, you're going to be maybe like 72C, 75C, that's Celsius, in a room that's maybe like 23, 24C. Now, with the water block on it, in this case, I was getting around 42 to 43C. For the GPU under load in the benchmark like heaven, you keep it running for like 20-30 minutes, which is really, really amazing. Even in my big Case Labs build with like ridiculous amount of radiator space, 42C is pretty good, and that's generally what I get. Sometimes you'll go down to 39C if the ambient's a little bit lower. So in general, that shows you how good the water cooling performance is in the Fractal Design Meshify S2. Airflow in the front, top, bottom, a lot of radiator space. So that's pretty much the recipe that you need for a great performing water cooling case. This is definitely one of the best ones. For me, it's almost pretty much just as good as the Cooler Master H500M. So if you like the design aesthetic of this, I would even go for this a little bit more than that. And of course, let's talk about the aesthetics. Now, this case, Fractal Design's sort of design philosophy is to have a very understated case. It's not, you know, crazy with RGB. It doesn't have a bunch of crazy design things going on. In fact, I think the Meshify S2 is going to be one of their more risque designs because of that front mesh panel. If you look at something like their Define R6 or even their new, you know, Fractal Design, the Define 7, it's very, very understated. It's very professional looking. You could definitely do a workstation in one of these, but I just absolutely love that Meshify case. I love the look of it. In fact, behind me here, if you can see, this is the Define R6. In here, I actually don't have a water-cooled build in it. I did an air-cooled build. I just thought it fit the nature of this. This is like a workstation with a Noctua cooler. So it's very similar to the Meshify S2. Only difference is that Meshify S2, of course, has that open layout, and it also has that mesh front panel, so you get a lot better airflow. This one doesn't have as good an airflow as that, so if I did a water-cooled loop in this, I'd have to, I don't know, maybe leave the front open or something like that to get, equal performance. But aside from that, aesthetically, I really like the way that the Meshify S2 looks. It's very understated. The size of it is really nice. It's not a particularly small case, and it's not a particularly large case. They do make the Meshify Mini, which I've also done a build in. I'm going to talk about that one in the separate video, because that one's like a whole different animal. They're really not the same, because the type of stuff you can fit in that, it's going to take different considerations than this. So in terms of aesthetic, I just think it looks tremendously good. It's very well laid out. Everything is designed really well. I did have an EATX motherboard here. This is an X299 Rampage 6 Extreme motherboard. As you know, these are a lot wider than a regular motherboard, and while technically it did fit, it felt really tight, and I wasn't able to get some of the cable grommets on the side. So I wouldn't recommend doing an EATX motherboard in this case. Even though technically it fits it, I ended up kind of taking it out just because I didn't really feel like it fit the nature of the case too well, and it gave me a few filament issues. So I would just have a regular ATX motherboard in here, and you'll be more than fine like that. Thirdly, let's talk about some other little build notes. In this case, it does have a fill port on the top if you want to put in sort of a fill fitting connected to your reservoir and your pump. Also, you could do like a little drain port on the bottom. You could fit a reservoir and pump sort of to the back panel. It comes with a little bracket, even though I put a radiator on the front and I ended up mounting the D5 pump and reservoir to the actual radiator. I just thought that looked a little bit nicer. And the bottom, of course, is open. I was able to pretty easily put a radiator down there. It takes some finagling because you have to sort of screw it in from the bottom. And then when you run your tubes, you have to do a really intricate little tube design. This case I had done with soft tubing when I first did it, with sort of the EK, the zero maintenance tubing, sort of that black thick tubing, but it did take a little finagling of the tubes to make sure everything fit in. Like I said, it's not the largest case, it's not small by any means, but it does require a little bit of finesse when you're putting the loop together, just because everything has its space and proportion and nothing's really oversized, so everything can get a little tight if you're putting in a lot of water cooling components. I really like the overall feel and look of the case, even the way that you take out the glass panel. It's very satisfying. You can just kind of clicks in place in the front and the back. Everything works tremendously well. Even the top panel, to pop it off, you have the little button that it comes off. So it's a fantastic case with very high build quality. And in fact, I haven't had any issues with it. That or even the Define R6. In fact, I'm even looking at the Define R7 and planning to do a water cooling build in that. Even though it's fairly similar, it does have a couple of nice upgrades. So I'll probably do a video on that case as well in the future, just because I think it's such a cool case. It really kind of demands a really cool build be done in it. Even though it's similar aesthetically, it does have a few really cool improvements just to the design and how it works, so I'm really kind of excited to try that out. And I love these cases so much, I don't mind having a Meshify and a Define case. Maybe I'll get rid of the older R6 and just upgrade to that 7. But overall, I really like these cases. I think they work tremendously well for water cooling. In terms of aesthetics, you definitely want to display your water cooling build. I mean, that's the point of putting so much time and effort into doing such a cool build. So this case does it tremendously well. The tempered glass is amazing. Everything's nice and clear. You could really do a nice visualization of your water cooling build, and that's one of the primary aspects of a really good aesthetically pleasing water cooling case, and this nails it on every case. All right guys, so to summarize, I think this case looks really incredibly good. It's pretty understated. It's not over the top or anything like that. It looks very understated, but at the same time it has everything you need to do a really beautiful loop in it. It's nicely designed. It has a few water cooling elements in it, like the fill port like we mentioned previously. The performance is really fantastic here. I was very happy with how good the airflow is, from the front, the top, and the bottom, so that's great. Build quality over the last few months has been really exceptional. I've had no issues. The case still looks great, performs great. So this is definitely a case I can highly recommend and really goes on my list of the top best cases you can get for water cooling. All right, guys, hope you enjoy the video. Remember to subscribe, smash that like button. Keep an eye out for the next video in this series. We're going to be talking about other water cooling cases and just adding to the series. And I'll see you guys on the next video.